In a stunning moment that's shaking headlines across Catholic and secular media alike, Pope Leo XIV has just clarified, no, corrected, the Church's official stance on one of the most debated and emotionally charged topics of our time, cohabitation before marriage and the deeper meaning of sacramental marriage itself. Was this a reversal of Church teaching? Not exactly. But what Pope Leo did was groundbreaking. He untangled centuries of confusion, brought nuance into rigid interpretation, and delivered a message that is both rooted in tradition and radically compassionate. Today, we break down exactly what Pope Leo XIV said, why it matters, and how it is reverberating in churches, families, and even political halls around the world. It was during a highly anticipated catechesis in Rome, a regular event where the Pope speaks directly to both pilgrims and the broader world, that Pope Leo XIV took to the podium. What was supposed to be a calm morning gathering quickly escalated into a global conversation. Pope Leo XIV began slowly, deliberately, looking out into the crowd of both youth and elders, priests and lay people. For too long, the Church has spoken about marriage and cohabitation in tones that did not fully see the hearts of people. He began. We must speak the truth, in fullness, and in mercy. From that moment, the tone was set. This wasn't going to be another theological reiteration. This was a pastoral correction, one filled with clarity, heart, and boldness. Over the next 30 minutes, Pope Leo made 3 clear and controversial points. Cohabitation is not marriage, but neither is it pure rebellion. Marriage is a sacrament, not a social contract. The Church must guide, not condemn. Let's unpack each one. Point 1. Cohabitation is not marriage, but it's not always sinful rebellion either. In the past, many Catholics have heard this loud and clear: living together before marriage is a mortal sin. Period. End of discussion. But Pope Leo urged a more nuanced view. When 2 people live together before sacramental marriage, we do not automatically assume rebellion against God, he said. Often we see confusion, lack of formation, or even economic difficulty. Not every situation is equal. Not every cohabiting couple is closing their heart to grace. This correction, or clarification, does not remove the Church's position that marriage is the ideal, but it removes the blanket judgment approach. For years, pastors, theologians, and even ordinary Catholics struggled with how to speak about young couples who love each other, live together, and desire faith, but feel disconnected from the Church's condemnation of their living situation. Pope Leo XIV is saying, in essence, let's stop throwing everyone into the same moral bucket. Point 2. Marriage is a sacrament, not just a romantic agreement. One of the strongest moments in the speech came when Pope Leo said, marriage is not simply 2 people in love. It is a covenant, a sacrament established by God, made in His presence, and for His purposes. He continued to explain that the Church will never abandon this sacred understanding. But he warned Catholics about something deeper: the modern trend of reducing marriage to a lifestyle upgrade or an emotional partnership. In a world where marriage is often treated like a temporary subscription. If it doesn't work, cancel anytime. The Pope's words were a call back to commitment, holiness, and the divine mystery embedded in matrimony. Sacramental marriage, he said, is the union of souls consecrated for a mission. That mission is love, service, and openness to life. Point 3. The Church must guide, not condemn. And here was the most powerful correction of all. The Church is not the tribunal of punishment. We are the house of formation, of healing, and of direction. This hit home for millions who feel alienated by rigid interpretations, exclusion from communion, or shame-based teachings. Pope Leo made it clear that while the Church won't endorse cohabitation, it will embrace, guide, and walk with those in it, toward holiness, not shame. He even mentioned real examples. A couple in Argentina who started living together to save money for a wedding but felt abandoned by their parish. A young woman in Nigeria who left the church because she was told she was living in sin, despite trying to prepare for marriage. A man in Italy who never received catechesis as a child, now wanting to marry his partner but scared to approach the church. These examples were not just emotional anecdotes. They were strategic, pastoral messages to the world. Within minutes of Pope Leo's address being uploaded to the Vatican's official YouTube channel, reactions poured in. Progressive Catholic groups applauded the move, saying it finally aligns doctrine with real human lives. Traditionalist commentators, however, expressed concern, with headlines reading, "Pope opens door to moral relativism," or, "Is this a backdoor to changing doctrine?" Mainstream media outlets had a field day, with CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera running with headlines like, "Pope says cohabiting couples are not living in sin?" To be clear, Pope Leo did not say that cohabitation is good or acceptable as a long-term arrangement. He reaffirmed that sacramental marriage is God's plan. But he clarified that we must distinguish between open defiance and human fragility, between rebellion and simply needing guidance. If you're wondering why this matters, here's the deal. If you're dating or cohabiting, this opens the door for you to speak to your parish priest without fear of condemnation. If you're a parent of a young adult living with their partner, this gives you a new way to engage them, through compassion and invitation, not threats. If you're a priest or catechist, this is a green light to form people patiently rather than judge them quickly. The Pope just shifted the tone of the conversation, not the content, but the delivery. The message remains, marriage is sacred. But the path to that sacrament? It must be walked with empathy, clarity, and understanding. As the sun set over Rome that evening, thousands who had attended the catechesis were left in deep reflection. Social media feeds across languages quoted the Pope's most moving line. "We must speak the truth, in fullness, and in mercy." And that, friends, is why Pope Leo XIV's words are not a departure from Catholic teaching, but a recentering of its heart. To understand the gravity of Pope Leo XIV's correction, we must go deeper, into the very roots of theology. Because some ask, is this Pope rewriting church doctrine? No, but what he is doing is reclaiming the original spirit of the Church Fathers, a spirit that has long been buried under centuries of cultural rigidity and moral panic. Let's dive into the theological backbone behind this papal teaching and uncover how saints, scholars, and Scripture itself support the Pope's tone and message. In the Gospels, Christ speaks clearly about the sacredness of marriage. In Matthew 19 verses 4-6, Jesus says, "Have you not read that the Creator made them male and female? For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh?" This passage affirms that marriage is a divine union. But let's also notice what Jesus didn't do. He never hunted down couples living outside this covenant to shame them. Instead, he invited sinners to repentance, yes, but through encounter, parables, and personal compassion. That's exactly the lens Pope Leo XIV is using. Not changing what's true, but changing how it's taught. St. Augustine, one of the most quoted theologians in Catholic history, is known for his brilliant mind, but also for his scandalous past. Before his conversion, he lived with a concubine and even had a child out of wedlock. Did God give up on him? No. Did the Church erase him? Absolutely not. In fact, in Confessions, Augustine writes, "Late have I loved you, beauty so ancient and so new." His journey of transformation wasn't instant. It was gradual. And if Augustine, who lived in sexual irregularity, could rise to sainthood, then Pope Leo's message that not every cohabiting couple is living in rebellion seems remarkably aligned with church tradition. St. Thomas Aquinas, the intellectual titan of Catholic theology, had a unique way of assessing sin. He asked not only what was done but why it was done. In his Summa Theologica, he distinguishes between mortal and venial sin not just by the act itself, but by the awareness, intention, and freedom behind it. This is critical when examining Pope Leo's remarks. When the Pope says that some cohabiting couples are not in mortal sin, he echoes Aquinas. A sin requires full knowledge and deliberate consent. That's a massive shift from how the Church has sometimes painted cohabitation, as a one-size-fits-all evil. Pope Leo is restoring nuance that Aquinas would approve of. Now let's look at someone more recent, Pope St. John Paul II. While known for reaffirming traditional sexual morality, he also introduced powerful frameworks in his work Theology of the Body. Here's what he emphasized. Human dignity must guide all moral teaching. Love must be free, total, faithful, and fruitful, but people learn this gradually. The Church must accompany people in their growth, not demand perfection before giving grace. Pope Leo XIV seems to be building directly on this foundation, saying that the pastoral hand of the Church must lead people to the fullness of truth, not beat them with it. To better illustrate Pope Leo's correction, let's compare two fictional but realistic Catholic couples. Couple A, James and Maria. Been dating for 5 years. Living together to save money for a wedding. Regularly attend Mass. Desire a church wedding but were told by a priest that until they move out, they're banned from all sacraments. Couple B, Chris and Lily. Living together out of convenience. No intention of marrying. See religion as optional. Show no interest in church teaching. Under old interpretations, both couples might be lumped into the same category, living in sin. But Pope Leo XIV is urging the Church to see the difference. We must discern hearts, not just judge appearances. Couple A is clearly open to grace, seeking truth, and not hardened in rebellion. That's where formation, accompaniment, and mercy should be applied, not rejection. One of the loudest critiques against Pope Leo's statement is this. He's watering down the truth. But here's the truth, Jesus never watered down truth, but he always offered mercy first. Remember the woman caught in adultery in John 8. The crowd wanted blood. Jesus gave compassion. Then, after offering protection, he said, "Go and sin no more." Likewise, Pope Leo's message is not, "Cohabitation is fine." It's, "We will not stone you at the door. We'll walk with you to the altar." This isn't a compromise. It's Catholicism at its most Christ-like. Let's address something critical. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, CCC, still holds that sexual union is morally reserved for marriage between a man and a woman, CCC 2353. Pope Leo XIV has not, and will not, change this doctrine. But what he is doing is clarifying the Church's approach to people who haven't yet aligned with that ideal. It's about recognizing where people are, not just where they should be. And that approach is already in the Catechism under pastoral care, particularly in section 1650 to 1651, which calls for compassionate accompaniment of those in irregular unions. Pope Leo is simply putting a global microphone on a pastoral truth the Church has long whispered in confessionals and chancelleries. So how do we hold these truths together? Cohabitation is not God's plan for love and intimacy. Marriage remains the sacramental union the Church teaches and celebrates. But not every cohabiting couple is closed off from grace. And the Church's job is not to exile, but to invite. Pope Leo XIV is modeling how a church walks with people, instead of waiting for them to clean up before opening the door. It's the Good Shepherd model, one that leaves the 99 to pursue the one, not with condemnation, but with compassion. As we conclude Part 2, we can say with confidence, Pope Leo XIV's correction is not rebellion against tradition, it is reviving the forgotten tradition of mercy, clarity, and process. In the words of Pope Benedict XVI, being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with a person. And Pope Leo seems to be saying, let us help people encounter Christ, not just code. Let your mercy be the bridge that brings people to truth. Pope Leo XIV. It's one thing for a pope to speak, it's another thing entirely for the world to respond. And that's exactly what's happening now. Pope Leo XIV's recent clarification on cohabitation and marriage has sparked a tidal wave of reactions, from praise to confusion, from policy changes to protest signs. In this part, we look at how the Church, and the world, are processing what may be one of the most pastoral yet controversial papal statements in decades. Immediately following the catechesis, the Vatican Press Office issued a statement clarifying Pope Leo's intentions. The Holy Father reaffirms the Church's teaching on the sanctity of marriage, while calling for pastoral attentiveness to those in complex realities. This clarification was meant to calm the waters. But not everyone was soothed. Inside Vatican circles, sources say at least a dozen bishops requested further clarification, not because they disagree with the Pope's tone, but because they worry pastors may interpret it too loosely or too strictly, depending on their ideological leanings. Cardinal Sandoval from Mexico said in an interview, "What Pope Leo has given us is a pastoral tool, not a loophole." But Archbishop Fournier from France offered a different take. "Some may take this as permission to live in cohabitation without spiritual consequence. We must be careful." Clearly, Pope Leo's message is forcing bishops and pastors alike to rethink how they counsel couples, and how they balance truth with tenderness. Zoom in from Rome to the local parish level, and you'll see the real tension unfolding. Father James in Chicago says his phone started ringing within minutes of the Pope's address. "I had 3 couples call me within 24 hours, asking if they could now receive communion while living together. It's been confusing." Meanwhile, in Lagos, Nigeria, Father Chinidis shared a different experience. "This message gave us a new door to open conversations with young people who had abandoned the Church. It brought hope." This is what Pope Leo seems to have anticipated, a diverse global Church, with different pastoral needs. For some parishes, his message is a challenge. For others, it's a lifeline. Perhaps nowhere is the impact of Pope Leo's correction being felt more intensely than in the confessional. For decades, priests have followed a standard approach. Couples who live together before marriage are encouraged to either separate, marry quickly, or refrain from communion. But now, some priests are feeling empowered to take a new approach. To ask questions before jumping to conclusions. To discern intention, not just address appearances. To offer accompaniment, not automatic denial. Father Matteo from Italy shared, "I had a couple who had been living together for 2 years. They were terrified of coming to confession. After Pope Leo's speech, they came to see me. For the first time, I could invite them into a process, not push them away." This is the pastoral shift Pope Leo envisioned, a church that doesn't rush to close the door but sits at the threshold and welcomes honest seekers inside. Social media has lit up with hashtags like #Pope Leo clarifies, #Marriage and Mercy, #Truth with Love. On Catholic Reddit forums, one user wrote, "This is the Pope I've been praying for. Someone who sees my situation, not just my mistakes." But others weren't so sure. A traditional Catholic YouTuber posted a video titled, "Is Pope Leo compromising doctrine?" It gained 500k views in just 24 hours, with the comment section full of intense debate. Still, the majority trend online? A sense of relief, hope, and finally being heard. One unexpected consequence of the Pope's message? A spike in wedding inquiries. Parishes across Europe, Latin America, and Africa are reporting that more couples who had delayed or dismissed church weddings are now reaching out. "We didn't think the Church wanted us," said a woman in Sao Paulo. "Now I feel like I'm allowed to try." The irony? By not condemning them, Pope Leo may have just inspired many couples to pursue sacramental marriage for the first time. In this way, his approach reflects the wisdom of St. Francis Delaware Sales. "More flies are caught with a drop of honey than a barrel of vinegar." Of course, the secular world isn't standing quietly by. Conservative outlets warn that the Church is on a slippery slope. Liberal journalists praise the Pope for finally waking up the Church. Politicians in some predominantly Catholic countries are even referencing the Pope's speech in debates about civil unions and family policy. But Pope Leo's spokesperson was clear. This is a spiritual matter, not a political endorsement. The Pope is not changing church law, only guiding its heart. Still, this hasn't stopped governments from trying to spin the message for their own benefit, a trend that may force the Vatican to release further clarifications in the weeks ahead. Let's take a quick global tour of reactions. In the Philippines, bishops say they welcome the message but stress the need for catechesis. In Germany, progressives see this as a green light for broader reforms. In Kenya, Catholic youth groups have launched new marriage preparation workshops under the theme, Mercy in Marriage. Clearly, this is more than a statement, it's a catalyst for change across continents. Let's hear directly from some real Catholic couples impacted by the Pope's message. Emma and Raphael, USA. We were planning to elope and just have a civil marriage. But after hearing the Pope's speech, we're reconsidering doing it right, with the Church. Anita and Joseph, Ghana. We felt shame for years because we started living together after university. Now we finally feel like the Church wants to help us, not scold us. Luca and Marta, Italy. This is not an excuse to keep living together. It's the push we needed to start the path toward marriage with grace. These voices are what Pope Leo spoke for. Not the headlines. Not the politics. But real people, seeking to love each other and God, and now finally finding a path through the Church's doors. As dioceses around the world try to apply Pope Leo's words, many are asking, what now? There is now a growing call for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, CDF, to release a follow-up document with clear examples of pastoral accompaniment, guidelines for priests in confession and pre-cana classes, clarification on Eucharistic access for cohabiting couples and process. Pope Leo has started the conversation, but now, the global Church must write the next chapters with wisdom and unity. Whether you agree or disagree with Pope Leo XIV's message, one thing is certain. He has made people talk, reflect, reconsider. The Church has a new pastoral tone, and it's forcing every level, from bishops to believers, to ask, how do we uphold truth with love? How do we call people higher, without pushing them away? And how do we reflect Jesus, who ate with sinners, walked with the wounded, and never once lowered the bar of holiness, yet lifted people toward it? That is the legacy Pope Leo may leave, not a change in doctrine, but a change in dialogue. Let us never speak of rules before we speak of hearts. Pope Leo XIV. In the centuries-long history of the Catholic Church, some papal moments leave ripples, others leave lasting change. Pope Leo XIV's bold correction on cohabitation and marriage is proving to be one of those moments. Not because he erased doctrine. He didn't. Not because he radically changed theology. He didn't. But because he gave the Church something it desperately needed in the modern age. A way to welcome without weakening. A method to guide without guilt-tripping. A language of mercy without moral confusion. In this final part, we explore how this message will ripple through marriage preparation, annulment processes, clergy training, and the Pope's long-term legacy. One of the first things Pope Leo XIV hinted at in the aftermath of his speech was the need to reform how parishes prepare couples for marriage. Currently, many dioceses offer short, one-size-fits-all marriage prep programs. But in a world where many couples already live together, this approach isn't working. Pope Leo proposes a shift. Let preparation be a journey, not an exam. Accompaniment, not interrogation. Under his guidance, dioceses around the world are beginning to extend marriage prep to 6 to 12 months. Assign mentoring couples from the parish to walk with engaged pairs. Offer pastoral counseling to help couples transition from cohabitation to sacramental marriage with grace. These steps are already being tested in places like Brazil, Poland, and Canada. Father Henri in Montreal says, "We've seen more cohabiting couples choose church weddings once we stopped shaming and started listening. This isn't just effective. It's evangelization through love." Pope Leo's correction has also shined a light on a long-standing issue in Catholic pastoral care, the annulment process. For couples previously married outside the church or those who are divorced and seeking new unions, the path back to the sacraments can feel impossible. Pope Leo's new pastoral model emphasizes speeding up annulment reviews for cases where the previous marriage lacked valid consent, educating Catholics about what an annulment truly is, not Catholic divorce, but a declaration that the marriage was invalid from the start, offering healing ministries alongside the legal process. No one should be left in limbo, the Pope said. If the Church teaches that healing is possible, it must not build walls around grace. This approach may change the culture of fear many Catholics feel around remarriage and bring countless couples back to the altar and the Eucharist. At the root of every compassionate parish is a well-formed priest. Pope Leo knows that if this pastoral correction is to be lived out authentically, the seminaries must change too. Under his directive, several global seminaries are already revising their curricula to include courses on complex pastoral situations, e.g., cohabitation, broken families, trauma-informed guidance, training in moral theology that emphasizes process and discernment, not just rules, psychological insight into why people live together before marriage, economics, trauma, fear, or lack of spiritual formation. As one seminary professor in Argentina put it, "We're forming shepherds, not gatekeepers. If we don't teach our future priests how to walk with sinners, they'll end up walking away from them." This renewed vision ensures that future pastors are equipped not just to defend doctrine, but to embody Christ. This correction isn't just for clergy. Pope Leo made it clear that the laity have a key role to play in this new pastoral path. In his words, "Every married couple in the pew is a witness, a mentor, a model. The Church needs more examples, not just exhortations." Lay people are now being encouraged to speak openly about their journey from cohabitation to marriage if that was their path. Volunteer as sponsors for engaged couples preparing for the sacrament. Become active in building parish cultures that lift up marriage without casting down those still on the way. In the U.S., this has led to a wave of small group programs like Path to Promise and Living the Sacrament, where couples share their real-life experiences with authenticity and hope. Perhaps the most powerful fruit of Pope Leo XIV's message will bloom among young people. In a digital world where relationships are shaped by dating apps, hookup culture, and disillusionment about love, the Church often seems out of touch. But this Pope is speaking their language. He acknowledges their reality. He understands their wounds. And he invites them into something higher, not by shouting, but by showing. Young people long for commitment, the Pope said. But commitment must be taught, nurtured, and modeled, not demanded. This is why many youth ministries are now including Truth and Mercy tracks, talking openly about cohabitation, sexual integrity, and the journey towards sacramental love. One youth leader in the Philippines said, "For the first time, we're not just telling teens what not to do. We're showing them why the Church's vision of love is beautiful." Of course, Pope Leo's correction continues to face resistance. Some theologians argue that nuance can lead to misinterpretation. Traditionalist groups fear that pastoral flexibility will erode doctrine. Even some cardinals remain silent, unsure whether to fully embrace or quietly resist. But Pope Leo remains steadfast. In his most recent Angelus address, he said, "When Jesus sat with sinners, the Pharisees murmured. Today, some still murmur. But I am not moved by murmurs. I am moved by mercy." This kind of spiritual courage is why many believe Pope Leo XIV may one day be remembered not just as a pope, but as a reformer of hearts. Let's step back and see the bigger picture. This isn't just about cohabitation. This is about a church reclaiming its role as both guardian of truth and well of grace. Pope Leo's correction invites every Catholic, from bishop to believer, to rethink what it means to evangelize, welcome, form, forgive, and ultimately, to love like Jesus. It echoes what Pope Francis once said. The Church is not a toll house, it is the house of the Father, where there is a place for everyone. Pope Leo XIV is building that house with words that correct, connect, and consecrate. If you're watching this video, you might be living with your partner and unsure where you stand with the Church, preparing for marriage and wondering how to approach your priest, a parent concerned about your children's choices, a priest or catechist unsure how to teach this new tone. Here's what Pope Leo XIV would want you to remember. 1. You are not condemned. 2. You are not abandoned. 3. You are not alone. Start the conversation. Visit your parish. Speak with compassion. Pray for wisdom. And remember, the Church's doors are wider than many think. Because Jesus doesn't wait at the finish line. He walks the road with you, and so must we. When history looks back at the reign of Pope Leo XIV, it may not focus on political moves or doctrinal decrees. It will remember this moment, the moment when the Church didn't lower the bar of holiness, but lowered itself in humility to help others rise. It will remember the Pope who didn't rewrite truth, but rewrote how we reach hearts. And it will remember these 14 words that stunned the world, yet healed so many. We must speak the truth, in fullness and in mercy. The sacrament is sacred, but so is the soul on the journey there. Pope Leo XIV. If this message touched you, share this video. Comment with your thoughts. And most importantly, take the next step in your journey toward grace. You are welcome. You are seen. And you are loved.